Welcome to Koffee Talks, a Pokemon card collecting podcast, featuring David Person, owner of the world's most complete English Pokemon card collection, and Dan Norton, a longtime collector with all the knowledge behind the cards.
I do not know. I do not know. I do not know. I do not know. Those are four kind of important words, Dan Norton, and I'm going to tell you why. When I was about 21 years old, I was just getting in the corporate world, and I sat with a person who was much older than me. He was a wonderful mentor, died way too early when I was quite young. And he asked me a question about the business that I was involved in. And he said, David, do you know what I'm talking about? And I said, of course I do. And he said, then tell me. And I pooped my pants because, Dan, I didn't know what he was talking about. And so the key is, it really makes a difference when someone asks you something, if you know what they're talking about, to tell them. And if you don't, to say, I do not know that answer, but I will do my best to figure it out. And I have a running joke with my partner in business on my team, my financial advisory team. And we'll say, are you sure about that? And somebody will say, well, I'm 99% sure. And you know what that means, folks? That means you are not sure. 99% sure is not sure. So acknowledge that and make sure that it's clear. So here's why I start today's podcast with this little topic, because my good friend and podcast partner, Daniel Norton, I'm going to be slurring a little bit today, guys, because I'm super tired. We got all these videos in every single day all week, still working the job, still living life, and can't keep my eyes open. So we'll do the best we can. But I said to my good friend, Dan, what's the deal with these Worlds Passes? And should I get it from Steven, who offered it, the Steven Kassoon? And Dan said, you know what? They can't be transferred. It is the way it is, whatever. And then I get a comment on one of the videos yesterday that said they could be transferred because his friend was able to transfer his pass in whatever mechanism he used to do that. So Dan's unequivocal expression of confirmation that it couldn't be done took me off that path. Now, by the way, folks, I'm not blaming Dan. I don't ever blame anybody for anything. I take the blame. I chose to listen to Dan. I trusted Dan. It's not Dan's fault. It's my fault. I take accountability. But I will tell you, because of that, if Dan had just said, I'm not sure, let's try to check it out, the end result of me not having a World's Pass at this point in time might have been different. And it happened again, something similar in the last 24 hours, when somebody sent me a message on one of the videos or one of my posts and said, hey, I'm completing this Obsidian Flames master set, and where is this card coming from that I see in Bulbapedia but I can't seem to find anywhere? And my good friend Dan said, you know what, it is from these judges' plaques from last year. And he left it at that. And then the guy came back and said, well, I only see that something was posted just a few hours ago. And I had Dan recheck, and it was actually from this year. So my lecture to Dan and my lecture to all of you out there is, just be careful. If you're not sure, say you're not sure. I work in a compliance-oriented business where if you say something, your words are documented in some fashion, and you can be sued for anything that is not ends up being correct, accurate, etc. So I need to be able to say to my clients and to my teammates and to my team members and to everybody, I either know the answer or I'm confident enough to tell you I do not know the answer, but I will go find you the answer. But in a world that we live in, and this was some great comments by Dan, a good friend of ours, not Dan Norton, Dan of, I always forget the name, I wrote it down, Codes and Cards Pro, who left some amazingly articulate and thoughtful comments on the last couple of videos. And he was talking about the political climate, the climate we live in and everything these days. It is really true that what you'll hear these days often is somebody spouting a bunch of lies, whatever that is, because when you say something over and over enough, it's actually a strategy to make other people believe them. So I'm not going to go away from being who I am. I know Dan Norton prides himself on his accuracy, on how much he knows about this hobby. It's why he's such a special OG in the hobby, because of his knowledge. He's not going to get everything right all the time, but I'm really, my little speech today is to just say, hey guys, if you don't know, make sure to say, I don't know, but let's figure it out together. Let's go to the resources we need to find out, because that will ultimately make things for a better result and hopefully a better answered question at the end of the day.
All right. First off, everything TPCI has put out about those passes says they're non-transferable. It says you cannot transfer it from one person to another, and it also says that when you register your interest, not when you buy the pass, but when you first sign up to the interest list that we all did a few days ago, that's when it imports your name and everything from the account that you used to sign up with. So everything that TPCI put out, all of the official stuff, suggested that there is no way to transfer it. That's straight up what they said. I don't know how people have been able to do it. I don't know if they did it with some sort of dodgy account, that they had a Google account that was, an empty name or something. I'm not sure how they did it. Everything TPCI put out says that you can't do it, which is why I erred on the side of caution. If Steven had already put his name in, there was no way he could transfer a pass to you. I don't know how there was a blank one.
Well, the idea was that the person said in the comments was that there was a way to actually transfer. You could move the email to someone else, and then I'm not sure if you paid first and then moved the email, or you moved the email and then paid. But basically, there was a mechanism. So, anyways, it just would have behooved us, only because sometimes they don't make these huge transitions. It's like I talked about the fact that it was a $99 3-day pass, and your take on it was, gosh, that's not that expensive. But there were other people that commented to us and said, hey, doubling the price over a course of a year or two is pretty ridiculous. And I come at it from that perspective that it's everything is a cost to people. It's not inexpensive to live these days. And so it just would have been something that I think we could have checked into and said, has anybody tried to do this at all? That's all. So, anyways,
Well, I would
understood.
say anyone who's done any kind of email switch after the pass has gone through, be careful. Those passes might get cancelled. TPCI have said you can't do that. If they've done it blatantly against what they've been told to do, there is every chance that TPCI turn around and say, well, we have identified the accounts that have done this, and we're cancelling those passes, refunding them, and then we're putting them back into the lottery because they broke the rules. And if that happens, the refund goes back to the person who originally bought it, so they get their original $100 back, and the person they sold it to for $300 now doesn't have a pass. So be careful. Like, we don't know if that's going to happen, because what they're suggesting is against what TPCI put. That's against the rules. So we don't know if it's definitely safe to do so.
All right. Fair enough, my
Yeah.
friend. But my lesson stands for all those out there in what I said. So, two articles circulating in the past 24 hours.
I
One
didn't
of
even
them
get to
has,
talk about the second thing yet.
okay, if you want, I didn't know if you were going to. I was going to let
Yeah,
you
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, I got that wrong because the first Professor Plaque that came out covered the first few sets of, or covered the last few sets of Sword and Shield era. I made the mistake of thinking it also covered the start of Scarlet Violet, and it didn't. The second plaque is what covered Scarlet Violet. If I'd been at home when you sent me that message and not walking around a Hobby Lobby trying to find blisters, I think I would have been able to double check quickly. But as I was out tracking down variants, I answered with what I thought, and I got the year wrong. That's what happened there. Is I was away from my resources.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, we can't
Yeah,
always have our resources right with us. And really, I'm going to always give you a little bit of heck every once in a while just because it's fun to do that. And that's what a nice podcast is about, kind of
yeah,
bantering back and forth. But I do try to, as we talked about yesterday, my way of staying relevant is try to impart some wisdom to a lot of the younger folks that are out there. And these are real stories that I've been involved with for a long time. And
yeah.
I've built some real tenets and values in life that I think are critically important, have been a mainstay of the reasons behind a lot of my success. So I use these to try to share with people. But all right, thank you for your comments. I'm going to move on to the two articles. One was Pokemon Company came out and has been putting in the press now that they are going to do. They're aware of all of the groundswell of dispute in the air, and they are doing everything in their power to print, and more print everything coming forward. So of course, no one knows exactly what that means, but I do think it's important from an intention standpoint. You've got so many people that are skeptical of everything Pokemon related right now, but I do like to hear that they're saying it. It won't bode well for anything I've got tucked aside, maybe. I don't care. I'm okay financially, and I would rather have all the stuff I have reduce itself in price immensely if it meant that we could get more collectors on board and being able to acquire this stuff, prismatic evolutions, everything else, to try to make for a more uniformly satisfactory experience in the hobby. So, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's really good to see that they've said that, but that's it. They said that back in January as well. They've told us that they're doing it. They said when the very first release of Prismatic came out, they said, we are aware of this. We are already doing reprints. There will be more of this product. I guess this article that they put out, the statement that they put out, said they're printing to full capacity. So literally as much as they can print, they're doing it, which is only going to bode well for collectors. You know, flippers and investors are going to get screwed over a little bit, but hey, that's not what I care about personally. So it's great. Hopefully a lot of collectors will be able to get what they want.
Yeah, and this is actually the third statement, if you technically say the one you talked about, Dan, after Prismatic, the one that they put on the website after the last
Pokemon Center, yeah.
was dropped. The Pokemon Center website, which talked about the fact they plan to reprint, and then this statement that I think was released through PokeBeach or something. So kind of at least you see the trend.
There's no way it was officially released through PokeBeach.
Okay.
There is no way they spoke to PokeBeach directly. PokeBeach is poison to TPCI, and rightly so.
Okay. You'll have to talk more. That would be for an interesting topic in another video, but because you've mentioned that, and I'm curious to know what that's about. But we'll try to stay on track a little bit today. So make a note, and we'll come back. Pin it. What do they say? Put a pin in it. Yeah. All right. And then the other article had to do with something right up near and dear to Dan Norton, guys. The nearest and dearest thing to Dan Norton. To Nan Dorton. The nearest and dearest thing to Nan Dorton. I love that. I think I'm going to write a book. It's a new novel about a guy that's almost 99% right at the time, or right percent of the time, or he's almost right never. Okay, Dan, here's the thing. The article says Worlds is coming up, and there's a Pokemon Center pop-up every year at Worlds, where you typically wait in lines, and if you're lucky, you get granted appointment slots, and you get to go wait in lines to hopefully shop for the things you get, where there's hopefully limits on certain items so that things aren't all sold out by the time that you get there. Well, the controversy has to do with the players. So you have the esports players that are basically saying, we have to play our esports tournament there, Pokemon Unite.
Was this article written by someone called Olivia?
It may have been.
I saw this article. It's utter crap.
Okay, let me finish.
It's just clickbait nonsense. It is complete. I know the article you're talking about. You don't need to finish. It is 100% inaccurate. She hasn't spoken to anyone.
I need to finish, Dan, so the rest of the people can understand the what's being presented. If I don't give any background, then you can't talk to it. So basically, in this crap article that Olivia wrote, that was nothing more than clickbait, but it certainly resonated with me. She was saying these guys are going to be out there and playing and whatever, and they've got to play during the same time. And the debate was, how can we get appointment slots if we want to go spend at the Pokemon Center and have a chance to buy things if we're in the middle of playing? And who should get to come first? Should we even have appointment slots? Should we just be able to go early because we're players? I would carry that over, not just from esports, but to anybody in the tournament itself. Thursdays, Fridays, before, whatever. And the big debate on all of this that has happened that Dan has mentioned to me, so I know it's not crap, Dan. I know this part's real. You've told me in the past that the content creators get to often jump the lines. They get in before anybody because of their value to the hobby and how much they bring, and that they can go sell and promote everything. So this whole concept of who should get a priority, and should content creators jump players? Should players jump content creators? Should anybody just randomly be in the lottery ahead of anybody else? Now I'm done, Dan. Now speak your damn piece.
Okay, the article that was put out, both me and Law commented on it in Verbank, because it said that the players were annoyed because they didn't get Pokemon Center slots. The article said that the Pokemon Center slots were completely sold out, which is crap. They haven't opened yet. And players do get Pokemon Center slots. Players are guaranteed a Pokemon Center slot outside of the tournament time. Last couple of years, players have been able to get slots on the Wednesday or the Thursday. Yes, there's been controversy because the content creators got in first, and the Leon Harts and all these other people got to go in and buy 3 skateboards and 3 ukuleles each or whatever, and they started to run out. So there is a debate of, should the players get priority over the content creators? And personally, I think yes. I also think the staff should get priority over the content creators, but we know that's not how it works because marketing is king, blah, blah, blah. But the article is utter nonsense because the players do get priority slots. The last couple of years, the players have been able to sign up for a slot that falls outside of their event so it does not clash with them playing. The thing that the article is kicking up a controversy about just doesn't exist.
Do you see that the article does bring up points though, Dan, that you've even admitted it yourself right now, that at least should be maybe, again, you would argue that Pokemon doesn't need to speak to any of this because they're making so much money. Who cares? If they choose to give to the content creators, let them do whatever they want. No one's gonna object. They can object, but Pokemon's not going to respond to it. So I do think it's interesting from the standpoint, if again these kinds of things at least allow for opinions to be formulated, for the groundswell to kind of grow again, if there's some discussion over how it could be done differently and more effectively. That's all. I'm not,
Sure. There can definitely be a discussion that's had about, content creators either getting to jump the line or not having, the limits that everyone else has stuck to. Like when I said it was last year, they were allowed 3 skateboards and 3 ukuleles each. Everyone else is limited to 1. That's definitely a discussion, but that's a tiny, tiny bit in the bottom of an article that was created to make drama out of nothing. That article is the written version of these drama channels we were talking about yesterday. It's creating a problem that doesn't exist and making a big deal out of it. Because the main thing that article is about is just not real.
All right. We need to start writing those non-existent articles. We need to clickbait the heck out of articles that sound real and reasonable and see if we can. No, forget it. We're not doing that. Yeah. So, Dan, I mentioned that Dan, the other Dan at I have to look down, Codes and Cards Pro. Thank you so much, other Dan, for your wonderfully thoughtful comments. And to everyone else. I mean, Steven, everybody. I mean, I can't list all the names because I'm too tired today. I should have a list in front of me, but we're not going to do that like we did in the long format Coffee Talks. I'm going to say that to me personally, not so much to Dan. Dan really doesn't care and he's way too busy. But to me personally, your comments make such a difference. Good, bad, and indifferent. They make me, I feel like I've got friends who I'm speaking with in the hobby who are knowledgeable about the hobby. You also sort of get where we're coming from on the channel. And there's a really valuable interaction going on that means a great deal to me.
I read every comment. I read every single one.
Which is exactly what I wasn't talking about. And this is the whole thing, Dan. You have to be a better listener.
It is a big deal.
You have to be a better listener. Because I wasn't talking about if we read the comments.
You were saying that I didn't care. You were saying it only mattered to you.
I was speaking for myself and saying just for myself. I didn't say we can both read comments and you could give a crap less and I could care immensely about them. I don't know what you feel about them. I want people to know I'm much more sensitive than you. They already know that, please. You're Mr. Straight and Narrow and you're looking for, I won't transfer that pass over to anybody. And I'm looking basically for the highest bidder, just get me in the damn door, okay? So we're not the same people, Dan. But what I'm saying is, for me personally, the comments, and for Dan, that you guys take the time, he doesn't really care so much about what you write. But for me, I care about every comment because it's like my friends. You are my friends, and it makes a difference in how we interact, and that it keeps my spirits up in being able to deal with this stuff. And before Dan lays into this whole thing and tries to defend himself, I'll add this one last thing here, which is critically important. As I've mentioned, in general, whenever I post a story to my Instagram account and I say that there's a new podcast coming out, for some reason, I lose a bunch of subscribers. So we are not doing that right now. I'm not posting on these stories for a while on these podcasts. So what I'm asking you is for Dan Norton, my friend and podcast partner, it would mean a great deal to me if you know other collectors that might benefit and might not be aware of this, or you're part of a group or whatever, feel free to let them know about this Coffee Talks podcast so that when they do drop, they'll be aware without me going, to the 8,000 followers or whatever, maybe smaller groups. Again, the concept or the common theme of this podcast today is groundswell, and see if we can grow it organically through people that you might have friends that are interested in what you're doing as well.
And at Koffee Talks Podcast on Instagram, that account is still going to be posting every day when every episode goes up. It's just mine and Dave's personal accounts. We're going to cut back to about once a week promoting it.
Okay. So anyways, all of your help is tremendous. I think it might have even been the other Dan who suggested that this Dan actually started using affiliate links in his postings. If it's the wrong person, I'm sorry, but I thought it was. And I thought that was very valuable as well. I just by virtue of being out there, people have approached me to set up affiliate links. So I have them for certain binder companies and certain page companies and things. And I think Dan should do all those same things. Like I think the gentleman said TCG player. So yes, absolutely. Then you shop through Dan and you get what you want and you get a few pennies or dollars going Dan's way. And that's really valuable. So all of those kinds of suggestions are truly appreciated. Thank you.
Cool. Well, we're 21 minutes in, so why don't we get on to what this episode's about and talk about some variants?
Okay, go ahead. So we talked about, you take it from there, Dan. Go.
I'm going to talk about this Vulpix before you stop me again. People are going to learn about this Vulpix from 2 episodes ago. So, right before we talked about those code variations on the EX series, I had said that what we count as a master set was everything that contained the original set logo and set numbering. And you said there's one exception, because you were meaning those codes. I thought you were talking about a certain Vulpix, because we had just been talking about it a couple of days before. So this is a Vulpix from the Heart Gold Soul Silver base set. So there was a blister pack released around a few years actually after Heart Gold Soul Silver. Had a Vulpix and a Ninetales in it. You'll recognize the kind of blisters that are out there now. It's kind of the Evolution line, and the top level of the Evolution line has a foil version. Nowadays, it's a Cosmos foil version. Previously, it was a Cracked Ice foil version around that time. Now, both of the Vulpix and the Ninetales in that blister pack had an error where they contained the wrong set symbol. So they were from Heart Gold Soul Silver. They had the Heart Gold Soul Silver set numbering, but for some reason they had the set symbol for Undaunted. Now, if you look at variant lists on things like Bulbapedia, everywhere definitely lists the Ninetales as a variant because it has that Cracked Ice foiling, so it meets what you'd normally think of as a variant, even though it has an error as well as a variation. But the Vulpix only has the error. So we were having a discussion about that within the last week of getting that added to Bulbapedia somewhere. Does it go in an error list? Does it go in a variant list? I've talked to Nathan. I think we're going to end up making like an error box to write that down there. But that's why I thought you meant that Vulpix, is because it's a variation from Heart Gold Soul Silver that does not have the Heart Gold Soul Silver set logo.
Do you know the number of that card, Dan? So people could at least, kind of look it up at some point.
Let me have a look. It is number 87 out of 123. The Ninetales with the same error, but also with the Cracked Ice variation, is 7 out of 123.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting because I don't know all of the different set symbols, so I wasn't really thinking when I was first looking at that card what that bottom corner right meant, and ultimately I just thought it was like a mistake, but it was just a different set symbol, and I didn't realize that. So,
yeah.
So which kind of made it moved it from that variant to potentially the error category.
Yeah.
Dan, let me do it. I'm going to insert a commercial real quick here for a variant that I'm looking for currently. There's a few of them, and I'm not going to do commercials for them generally, but this one is such a big deal. So I'm looking for the Gengar VMAX Prize Pack Series 3, Dan?
2. Series 2.
Series 2. It's expensive card. You can see it from $700 to $1,500 out there, whatever. It's from what set is that card from, Dan?
The original set is Fusion Strike, but you're looking for the prize pack version with the Play Pokemon logo on it.
Okay. So if any of you out there, for any particular reason watching, happen to have that card or know of that card, I would be glad to try to acquire that card from you at, double trade value or something, give you some nice things to try to get that to, as Dan and I try to round out the early prize pack series cards, which essentially are all variants, whether or not we keep them as a prize pack set entirely or they go into their actual set, sets in with the logos on them as variants. This happens to be one of the most expensive cards still left in the early series that we're looking for. So I thought I'd at least mention it in case somebody might have an interest or know about it and make a good trade for it. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, you've put your advert in. What else do you want to talk about with variants? I got my Vulpix out the way.
Okay, so Dan, talk to our audience about some of the more interesting variants that you've had to sort of try to help me pull together through the years. And by interesting, it could be something really obscure, it could be something really expensive, it could be something that's very limited. Sometimes those meet, sometimes they don't meet for a variety of reasons. But what generally comes to mind?
I mean, generally the big thing, like the rarest ones, are definitely the champion stamped IC promos. Like there was always the Oceania IC, which no longer exists. There was the North America IC.
IC stands for International Championships.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was sometimes the Europe one, because if they held it in Germany, the promo was in German. So you only care about the English ones. So sometimes the Europe one. And then for the very first year, there was also the Latin America one. But after that, Latin America got Portuguese every year. So those champion ones are the biggest ones. And if we're throwing out adverts, the last two, the Buddy Buddy Poffin from EUIC and the what ball is it? Nest Ball. The North American Nest Ball, the two champion stamped ones. David also still needs those. Tried reaching out to a couple of winners, haven't had much success. So if you know any of the winners who are looking to sell, definitely get in touch, or looking to trade again for much, much higher trade value than cash value if there's stuff they want. So yes, those are the big ones from the last couple of years. That's an ongoing thing. Probably the most expensive variant that comes to mind, unless I'm missing something, is the Stadium Challenge Deoxys, because that's a 5-figure variant card, and I don't think any of the champion ones have reached anywhere near that. We talked about that multiple times on the original run of this podcast, where there was only about 25 copies actually went out at this one event in Austria back in 2007 or something like that. So that's another obviously very rare one. Other ones that are becoming harder to find is EB Games, the Australia New Zealand store. Those are just a little bit more difficult because of how few sellers are getting a ton of them over to the States, really. Like with the European variants of set promos, generally there's a lot of European sellers will be actively trying to sell to the States, or will like sell to someone in the States in bulk and ship a load over. That hasn't been the case as much with the EB Games ones. And other than that, it's like random blister packs have been sometimes very difficult to track down. There was Water Web Hollows were an absolute nightmare. It was some re-released product from early Sun and Moon. I remember those. Anything like that, the hardest things to get are either the super rare or just the weird. Like the things that no one wants, and Pokemon randomly go, okay, this tin is getting a Cosmos foil variant. We're not announcing it, and it's only releasing at Hobby Lobby. That's a real thing that's happened before. They've released tins exclusively at Hobby Lobby and you just don't know about it until someone posts it online. That's always the most difficult thing to keep track of, is just when they do nonsense like that.
Dan, let me ask you then, let me give you a couple other examples. Tell me if these fit into variants that, I know they're in my binder pages, but I don't ever know exactly. So how about Trainer Deck A, Trainer Deck B? Are those considered variants to the base set?
That's a really weird edge case that I think I'd consider them their own set. I mean, just before recording, me and you were talking about World Championship decks where they have, the silver borders, the different backs, the player's signature on the cards. But you're never going to break down those decks and put, the set variants into their regular sets. If you're keeping those, you're keeping them together as the decks. I don't know any collector who's putting World Championship deck cards into the variants with their regular sets. And Training Deck A and B kind of feel like that to me. It feels like, even though they're cards from base set, because they have those different backs, they have the red borders and stuff on the backs, that much more feels like it's a set on its own. And obviously they're incredibly expensive and incredibly rare. But yeah, I don't think I would categorize them alongside as variants from base set or as part of the base master set or anything like that.
Dan, next question then. How about the sample set cards? The cards with the sample on them. I guess they have the word sample. They have Japanese backs. Is that correct?
They have Japanese backs. They also have Japanese set numbering. They're cards that would eventually get released in Expedition, but they do not have the Expedition set numbers. They have the set numbers of the Japanese E Series 1. So,
Okay.
no, those are, they're test prints, really. They're not officially released cards. They're a test print of card similar to, your Disco and Cosmos foils from base set. They're similar to that. It was a test printing. I again would consider that its own set, and especially because of the different numbering and stuff, I would not consider that part of the Expedition set.
Okay, so I need to stop you there, because when you throw something in, it really begins to level up the layers of complexity. So I'm not thrilled with the fact that you went to this following and you said, well, those are like considered test print cards, and like your Discos and your Cosmos, because what was more important is what you'd already said. Japanese backs, different set numbers from the Japanese set. That to me takes them out of this concept of variants. But the Discos and the Cosmos Hollows, which we'll get into as a whole nother video, especially because of the whole playtest thing. But those cards have the same numbers, have the American or blue backs, and they just have different hollow patterns. So I don't want to confuse the audience by thinking that test prints ought to be not considered variants just because they're test prints. Does that make sense?
You can say that. I personally wouldn't consider them variants because they're not officially released cards. Because when we're talking about variants, we're talking about, completing a master set. What would we consider to be a master set? And that we've said that would include all variants. And to me, that counts officially released variants. I would never count any test print or anything not officially released as part of a master set.
Okay. So I don't necessarily agree, but I absolutely appreciate your opinion. And I understand it completely. It reminds me of what we were talking about 2 or 3 days ago, because I don't need to call it a master set, right? I can call it a grand master set. I'm calling it the ultra master set. The master set of all master sets. I totally get where you're coming from. So I guess it's just how we look at it. But let me throw something at you then that follow up from that. I already know your answer because you just said it, but let's throw it out there. The FPO cards, for position only cards.
No, again, test prints.
Okay, so
though those have the Expedition, I believe those have the Expedition logos and numbering.
Yeah,
they're test prints. I wouldn't consider them part of the Expedition master set. I wouldn't consider them variants. I would consider them a test print.
Okay, good. And I knew you were going to say that. Dan, how about something? I think that you actually had a card at one point that was either not in great condition or was in reasonable condition, and then you swapped it for mine, and we kept upgrading this card. It was like a Celebi or something from a DVD or a VHS tape.
Yes, the Celebi from Triumphant. It's a non-hollow Celebi from Triumphant. It was a DVD promo that was only, as far as I know, was only released in the UK. There might have been some other countries in Europe that do English language cards that also had it. But it's so hard to find in good condition because I got mine and I believe yours and someone else's potentially when the DVD actually came out. I think I remember going and buying multiple copies of the DVD. Maybe I didn't know you that then. Maybe that was before I was getting stuff for you, but definitely mine and a couple of other people's. I went and bought multiple copies of that DVD, and the cards were not in good condition. I mean, they weren't in mint condition, I should say, because the card had no protection. If you know now when promos get released, normally like the box topper here from Journey Together, it's sealed in the cellophane. A lot of the later DVD promos were like the Keldeo, which came out a couple of movies later. That one came sealed. The Celebi was literally a loose, unsealed card just in the DVD box rattling around, which that's never going to stay in mint condition with any kind of shipping.
And that card was just one that also there wasn't a lot produced. So that was the whole thing is that, first you have
Yeah,
to know about it, then you have to be
it
able
was
to find it
country
and all the rest
specific.
of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to give you one more that just because you remember the stories more than I do. So most of the time, 99 times out of 100, you're going to find the variants for you and for me. So,
Yeah,
but this was an
that's
instance
that's
where
what I've been doing the past 2 days. Is
in the past 2 days and the past 12 years.
no,
So
but the past 2 days I've been driving around stores buying things. I got mine and Law's GameStop promo this morning, but I wasn't able to get yours because it was one per person. But I'll
yeah,
I'll work on that still.
yeah,
Anyway,
Dan and I were talking about this yesterday after our podcast. I was saying he goes to Target and they have a limit of 2 items or whatever. And so he picks up a couple of blister pack variant packs but he can't get enough of them to get for him and Laura and me all at the same time. And
yeah,
so he has to go and then shop it somewhere else. And I said, Dan, why don't you just ask another shopper there to buy it for you? Just hand him the money and say, could you do me a favor? It's limit per 2 per person. And first Dan said, well, gosh, isn't it strange that it's 2 per person per item? So they'll give you 2 blisters and 2 ETBs, but they won't give you 3 blisters, and that's kind of funny.
yeah, yeah.
And then he said, and then a lot of times the stuff's behind the counter, so you have to ask. And I said, great. So you ask the person that's going to be your helper for the day to please do me a favor. Here's your $15. I'm going to give you the money. Could you just go ask for one of these and buy it and then walk out of the store? And of course, Dan that is not something that's typically up Dan's alley because again, we have to cross the road of gray versus black versus white versus shadowy behavior when he's definitely not trying to be the person that's scalping. We're just trying to pick up some variants and stuff. So
The other thing that also gets me is when there's 2 blisters and they have very different cards in the front, like and go, this one's Kling Klang and this one's Rhyperia, and they're like, yeah, but it's got the same barcode, so that's the same product, and I'm like, please just let me get one of each for me and one of each for my wife. They're clearly different. Like, no, it's 2 the same. But I will say, after we did talk last night, me and Laura were talking about what to do for dinner, and we were about to drive to Aldi and get some food. And then someone posted a photo in a local group of the Target that we had literally just been at, had put up more different ones.
oh, they had.
So we then went, all right, well, we're going to that Target. And we went and we got most of what we were still missing. So now, out of the 4 variant blisters, me and Law have full sets, and you now have 3 out of the 4. So I just need to get you
That's
one
great.
more.
That's great.
Yeah.
I don't over where we are. You can't ever find anything stocked in a Target whatsoever. If
We
it's
just
in
got
there,
lucky. Like, one of the
yeah.
Targets we were at, I was asking the service desk everyone, and one of them literally went, oh, the guy's back there now putting the display out for tomorrow. And we went up and there was a line of people, so we just stood and chatted with people for a bit, and then everyone was pretty respectful. They just took what they wanted. They took the one of each thing limit, and everyone was chill about it.
I'm going to leave you with one last example you can talk about,
Yeah.
then we can finish it up. So the last example I was going to bring up, the one that I talked about or alluded to, was where I actually found something for us. And one night I was shopping for variants or whatever, and I ended up I had to travel. I found a Toys R Us shop. Where was it, Dan? In Australia or something?
Potentially, I'm trying to think of what card you're talking about, and then
What
I'll
it was
remember.
I bought us knockout collections that were only
Yes.
released.
Oh God. Yeah.
And they were only released. I found them on a Toys R Us site across the world. And I think I ordered like 4 or something, or I don't know what all happened, or I got it
Yeah.
shipped.
Yeah.
I had to get it shipped to somebody there, and they had to ship it across. But sometimes the stories, and I'll say that for another day. One of some of my favorite stories are around when I first started, not first started, but 2007, 8, 9, something like that, when I found the snowflake calendars. So we'll leave that for another day. But and how I ended up picking those up.
But I'll say that the knockout collections you're talking about, they have a Cosmos foil of Typhlosion or Meganium from Lost Thunder, depending on which one you get, and there's like 3 packs in them. And I think the problem was the first time I saw anyone post about them online was about 3 or 4 months after they came out. So everyone I spoke to in Australia said, yeah, they've all sold out. I think it was like an Australian Rite Aid or something exclusive, and they just sold out everywhere. I don't know if I still need another set of those, because I know you got me a set, so I don't know if Law still needs a set, really, but I need to check that.
I would certainly think she would, because those seem to be really hard to come by.
Yeah. I don't remember if I managed to lock something up with another Australian seller at one point, but yeah, I'd have to check that.
So listen, I'm going to say one more time, thank you to all that are watching. Thank you to those that are taking the time to comment. It does really make a big difference. I was going to say one last thing at the end, but now I'm too tired to forget.
Too tired to forget.
Too tired. I'm too tired to remember, and I've already lost it too, and I've already forgotten. So I'm just going to shut up. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you very much. And that's all I've got for today.
All right.
Thank you for watching me sleep today. That was nice.
Yep. Thanks for people sticking with these as they get longer and longer every day. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, with music by More Than Never and artwork by Lore Norton. A special thanks to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to.